that.
Sounds good. So thanks everyone for joining the Job Search Accelerator. For those who've been following us, we're actually in the third installment of the series. So we started a couple of weeks ago with the Foundations course, which talks about the basics of the job search. And really the basics are networking, right, which we covered last week. We also did a little bit on LinkedIn. This week, we'll be focusing a little bit more on interviews. And next week, we'll be focusing on resumes. So those three components, networking, interviews, and resumes, is really all that you need for the job search. Now, there's another third one where it's kind of experience in building your portfolio, but we'll assume that you can already manage that because we wanted to keep it simple. Otherwise, it'd be a 5-part series and a 6-part, 7-part series, right? So for those that don't know me, so my name is Luki Danukarjanto. I am Indonesian, if you're curious where the last name comes from. But I was born there and I grew up in the Toronto area. I ended up getting starting doing my degree in computer science. I wanted to be a video game designer. Right? I played too much video games as a kid, but turns out that I wasn't too much into the design side, and I didn't really want to do like the physics or the deep technical. So when I graduated, I lucked out and I landed a job at Deloitte. So I was on their technology consulting side in the supply chain consulting world, and I spent over 12 years there. And why a lot of folks want to speak to me is I used to run their undergrad campus recruiting program when I was there. So from 2009 to 2015, when I left, I literally had the list that said yes or no for anyone that got hired across all the universities in Canada. And I worked in tandem with the NBA hires as well. So that was a slightly different team, but we were kind of close cousins working together. And I left all that. I was a senior manager. Next step would have been partner. And I decided to leave it because I wasn't necessarily fulfilled in my work, right? I did a lot of soul searching, self-reflecting, and talking to mentors. And I found that what I loved doing was coaching. And I found a gap where a lot of the folks who go into the workforce and often of Asian immigrant descent and have to become like a doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer, right? And they may or may not have attained that, or they have got it and they're actually unfulfilled. So what I like to say now is that I found my purpose helping others find theirs, right? So my platform is called Swike, Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier. And I share the stuff that I wish my younger self knew. And most of it is related to soft skills, right? So I'm a huge advocate of soft skills learning. And I wish in school they were teaching things like emotional intelligence, effective communication, time management, learning to learn, that sort of thing. And then I think the world would be a lot nicer and better place, right? Now I do a lot of content creation. I have a YouTube video. I mentioned the book and podcast. And yeah, so I'm glad to be here with Kunal and sharing my insights on kind of the job search and on the interview side. So Kunal, I don't know if you want to do an intro for the recording or.
I think for those who are here, most of you guys, well, all of you know me, Shivangi, potentially not you. I'm the founder of Getting Ahead, which is a talent platform. Early days still in the journey, but we are focused exclusively on talent and bridging the gap between them and small to mid-sized businesses. Small to mid-sized businesses in Canada, depending on the data set you look at, whether the CFIB or whether Statistics Canada, create upwards of 90% of all jobs in this country. I don't think people fully understand how meaningful that employment base is. Because when you're coming out of school or you're a new immigrant to the country or you are versed in big organizations and kind of the professional backgrounds that lead you towards big banks, big consulting firms, big whatever it may be, you see big employers. That's what has access to you. That's what has dominance on existing platforms, but that is not the driver of the economic and job base in this country. And increasingly, we're focused on bridging the gap between what we believe is a lot of meaningful talent out there, and the small to mid-sized employers who actually drive this economy.
That's awesome. So thanks, Kunal. And then I'd love to hear a little bit from the folks here. So we have a bit of a smaller group. So if you can probably go off of mute and share a quick introduction, just kind of your background and really what do you want to get out of this session? Is there anything specific that I can hope to cover? So I'm going to go around and maybe Amali, if you can go, and then Ramalikun afterwards, and we'll see if Shubangi's able to get on. So Amali?
Thank you, Luki. So, I graduated from my MBA in June of 2023. I'm a consultant by profession, worked with EY for 5 years prior to my MBA, currently working as a contract analyst doing some financial consulting. What I'm looking out for from this particular session is interviews are generally places where I think I do best, but that's not kind of resulted in the results that I'm looking for. So trying to understand what my perception going into an interview is, and what is it that I can improve, and also how can I understand the small nuances of the interview process and of the interviewer, that I can maybe play off during the interview. So yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Amali. Ramalikun, if you can go, and then
Um, Hello everyone. Can you hear me?
yes.
Yeah, thank you for another great session. We've been having beautiful sessions back to back and so good. Okay, so my name is Remy. I'm currently a student with York University, and I'm an aspiring human resources professional. So what I look forward to take out from this session is what do interviewers look at, as in what are the key things they look at when they interview you, how I can improve upon myself and be bold to face the interviewers. And so that's what I'm here to look at. Thank you.
Perfect. So thanks so much. And Shubangi, I'm not sure if you're there, or Prakar, I'm not sure if you're in a place where you can do a quick intro for yourself.
Hi, Luki. Thank you. Yes. Hi, everyone. So I'm sorry I'm traveling, so there might be a bit disturbance in the background. So I'm basically a marketer by profession, currently working as a marketing specialist for a higher education pharma group of institutions called Academy of Applied Pharma Sciences, and did my MBA from the Schulich. Graduated almost a year back, May 23. And I basically am a lawyer originally. Like back home in India, I was a lawyer, so did some marketing jobs back there as well for my law firm. But this was majorly a pivot for me. Fortunately, I was connected to Kunal, so did a lot of interviews initially, and none of them converted. Did some research myself, and then fortunately was exposed to this wisdom. So I think I know a thing or two about interviews, but the turnout, I guess, could be better for me. Like before I got a full-time role, I had to interview for like almost a dozen organizations. I personally feel it should not have been those many to have just one offer. So maybe there's still something missing. uh so maybe to refine it may be better. I think that's what I'm looking to get. Like maybe every 4 to 5 interviews should ideally, I think, result in an offer.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll be able to share some insights. And for those that are curious, we'll actually have an exercise to be on the hot seat if you want to kind of get yourself marked and have a bit of a like a crowdsourced review. So thanks everyone for sharing. The areas that we'll cover today is just fundamentals, right? So some of you will know this already. Some of you might be surprised of what some of the foundational elements. We'll actually do an exercise on the tell me about yourself, which is probably the most important question to be able to answer. And whether they ask that question in that specific way or not, you should be able to articulate that. And like I mentioned, interview practice. So for those that want to be on the hot seat, we can kind of put you on there. So, and my promise to you is that you will know a little bit more about interviews and be a little bit better at interviews after the session. So does that sound good to everybody here? Awesome. Okay, so the interview process and how it works, right? So presumably, yay, you did a lot of the big legwork and got that interview, right? So it often starts with a short list. So typically for any given role, a company might want to interview maybe 5, 7 people for a role, sometimes more, sometimes less, but that's generally the ballpark, right? So you want to have a selection, but you don't want too many where it takes up a lot of time, right? So the hiring manager will basically interview people. Sometimes it's over the span of a day or weeks, sometimes multiple, but hopefully not too long. And basically, once you have that interview, then you basically go into a pile, right? Yes, no, or maybe, right? So if they have 5 candidates and all of them are yeses, well, then someone has to like kind of arm wrestle and fight it out in terms of which is the winning candidate. If you're a no, then oftentimes you'll be let know. But sometimes you might be put in the maybe pile as well. Sometimes they invoke the Miss America rule, where if you're familiar with that, they don't tell the people who didn't make it until the person actually accepts the offer, right? Because what happens is they might have like 5 really great candidates, especially if you move later on into the process, and they would hire any of you, but they don't want to make an offer to someone and then say no to the other ones and then have them decline, right? So until that person accepts the offer, and sometimes even until they start, right, they don't even let the other people know, right? So that's not necessarily a great practice, but sometimes it's there. So until you get a firm no, you might still be in the running. So what you may want to do is follow up on a weekly, bi-weekly basis just to see what progress is being made and if there's any other additional information that could be provided there, right? And interviews happen in all shapes and forms. Oh, and obviously from there you get the offer. They happen in all shapes and forms where you'll have kind of initially an HR screening interview, right? So oftentimes it's 2, 3, 5, 7, even more interviews. So usually the higher up that you are, the more interviews that you'll come in. But you'll probably need at least 2, if not 3 interviews, sometimes 4 or 5, depending on the company. But you can probably expect 2. So the first one is usually like an HR screening interview, right? It's usually a 15, 20-minute interview just to make sure that things check out. So usually it's a conversation just to ask about your resume. One, they're mainly validating that you can communicate, right? So they're asking questions about resumes, any kind of deal breakers, and what you'll want in that process is a salary range, right? And most people are like, well, don't they ask that later on? Not necessarily, right? So oftentimes you would want a range so that they identify that you're in the ballpark. Now, I believe Ontario is going to introduce some legislation where they're going to require the salary range in job postings. I don't think that's in effect yet, but until that is there, you should do your homework and know what it is, right? So be prepared for that. And some people become cheeky and say, well, I'd like whatever this role is offering. And I do know that one surefire way to annoy a recruiter is to not answer their question. So if they ask you a question of what is your expected salary range, you should have one, right? So do your homework and be comfortable in that. Then you might get into any number of technical, functional roles, and that's, can you do the work, right? So someone in the role, whether you're in coding or business analysis or marketing, they'll ask you information about that subject matter, right? And then you might get into a behavioral fit, right? So usually the later stage interviews, if you're interviewing with executives or partners, right, then you'll be asked, well, do they actually want you on the team, right? And oftentimes the operative example that people will have during this whole process is, would I mind being stuck in an airport with this person for like 7 hours, right? So they're hiring a little bit based on your personality and all that. So make sure that it shines throughout, right? And occasionally, depending on the company or the role, you might get a case interview as well, right? And you can have any of these at any given time or all of them, sometimes together and sometimes sequentially or in different orders, right? And nowadays, there are different formats where you might have an in-person recording, in-person session. So that's the normal one. With COVID, a lot of things are virtual, right? And nowadays, a lot of it is technology enabled and recorded. So don't be surprised if you're accepted for the first round and you get a link, and then what happens is it says 3, 2, 1. Tell me about yourself, right? Or whatever questions. So get used to having yourself recorded and playing back, because for those who aren't used to it, it is a different experience, right? It's not as fun. Some people are like, I don't mind when I'm talking to someone, but once that like blinking red light is there and I know I have like a time slot, I can't re-record, then it becomes a different experience. So get used to it, because that's where more companies are moving towards, where they're having this kind of pre-screen step. So I mentioned like the 5 to 7 folks, they might actually send like 10 or 15 in order to get down to the 5 to 7, right? Just to pick the best out of the lot that screen through, right? You might have a group interview where usually for the lower levels, there'll be you and a couple of other candidates, right? And that are in competition. You might have a panel interview where you have all the people, where you have the HR person, the technical person, your future boss, your boss's boss, and a team member all in one panel, and they'll take turns asking questions or whatever. And sometimes if you're in, let's say, law or consulting, you might have a super day where you have an interview at like 9 a.m. with the HR person, then 10 a.m. with the technical person, and then 11 a.m. With another person. And then you have lunch, which is still an informal interview, and then next and next and next. And they kind of put you through the ringer to make sure that you're a good fit, right? So that's pretty straightforward. I mean, you might not have thought of it in that level of detail, but you probably understood that at most of this level. Has anybody heard of anything different or have any questions in regards to their own interview experiences? Okay, so for me, the fundamentals of interviews are really people hire for 3 things, right? They hire for fit, they hire for skills, and they hire for experience, right? So fit is, do I like you, right? Next is skills. Do I believe you could do the job? And the third is experience, right? Have you done it before? And the interesting thing, if you have the first and the second one, it actually doesn't matter as much as if you have the third one, right? So for those who are always talking about like Canadian experience, right? If I like you and I believe you can do the role, right, I'll hire you, right? And usually if you have the experience back home or whatever, it's because I don't believe you can do the role, or I don't like you enough in order to give you a shot, right? So Kunal, you had some comments you want to add?
Yeah, just lowering my hand. I think this one is so critical, right? And I also realize it's entirely up to the interviewer and personality sort of matches and whatnot. And it takes kind of still skills and experience largely out of the equation. So it really is on any given day, did the person you meet actually happen to like you well enough to think they'd take a chance on you?
Yeah.
Right. But this one, and I love the fact you have it first, because if I had to weight these in order of importance, that would be the one that would get the most importance.
100%. And it's purposely done so, right? Like if I like you, I could probably excuse you, even if I don't think you can do the job. I presume to like you because you can learn it, right? And having done it before, right? I'll give a shot for the up and comer versus someone who has 7 years experience or whatever that I know can do the job. I just don't like you, right? For whatever reason, right? So that's the thing. That's the thing. Now, this is why for a lot of folks, we recommend networking as the best way to land an opportunity, right? Because how do you best demonstrate that I like you? Well, either you have the social proof of someone who's already referred you, right? And they vouch for you as well, right? And you're not just a random piece of paper that just came through the door, the system, right? There is actually some validation on that, like, right? And if you've had a coffee chat with the interviewer and they just want to just check your fundamentals, your functional, your technical, whatever, then that's another way to do it, right? And when you get into the interview itself, I usually break it down into 2 components, right? One is the delivery and one is the content, right? So for more technical folks, oftentimes they need to work on both, right? Like those shy, introverted computer scientists, like I used to be, right? I couldn't talk my way out of a paper bag, that sort of thing, right? So I needed the help in terms of being a little bit more dynamic. Some of the things that people don't appreciate in, let's say, a virtual environment is I was on a call with someone and he mentioned like, I don't know if people have hands anymore, right? Because people will just talk like this and they'll just convey. Versus if you're in person, I can see your hands, and a little bit of hand gestures can go a long way, right? Now, some of you who are more extroverted or really good communicators, you have the delivery down pat. But the second part is the content, right? And really the delivery is just a mechanism. It's kind of a baseline. You need to be good enough in order to get past the filters. And it's the content that's the thing, right? And some people are lulled into a false sense of security because they say, well, you know what? My interview is like an 8 out of 10, right? The problem is it's that 8 out of 10 is a 5 out of 10 for the delivery and a 3 out of 10 for a content, right? And if content's really the decision, you're at a 60%. So I'm not hiring you at that point, right? And in this market, it's a very tight and it's a very conservative market where it used to be that a 7, 8 could probably get through. Now you better be a 9 or a 10, and you better practice yourself so that it's so rehearsed and practiced and polished that both the delivery and the content are there, right? And for the questions themselves, I say that every interview question is a 3-part question, right? The first part is whatever the question is. The second is, and how does that benefit the company in the role? And the third is, and why should I hire you, right? So when they ask you, tell me about yourself, it's like, well, I'm a student and I like to code and I like long walks on the beach and I eat spicy food. Like, no, because the second part is, how does that benefit the company in the role? Because when that's in the picture, you would answer it a bit different. And the third one is there because some people do what I call pulling your punches, where they say, oh, I thought they'd ask me another question, so I was saving it for later, right? But the thing is, they might not, right? There is sometimes a standard guide, but a lot of recruiters, a lot of interviewers will go off script. So they might ask a question, they might ask different questions in different orders, and they might not get to the one that you really want to get through. So never save your best for last. Always start with the good parts, right? And first impressions and all that sort of stuff, right? You want to lead with the important stuff, right? So if we break them down into the 2 big components, delivery, right? I have what I call RBF. Does anybody know what RBF is? It's resting B face, resting mean face, right? So if I was sitting there, I've actually had someone come up to me and say, Luki, are you okay? Right? Are you upset? I'm like, no, this is actually just me thinking, right? So oftentimes when you are nervous, when you are answering a question, right, you're probably not as happy as you used to be, right? Sometimes you're actually downright scary when you do it. So that's why recording yourself can be super helpful, because you realize, ooh, I didn't realize I did that. Ooh, I didn't realize I look like that when I answered a question, right? So something as simple as a smile can make you that much more approachable, make me want to spend that time stuck in an airport with you, and again, get me to like you a little bit more, right? And it presumes that you actually want to be here, you want the job, right? So practice that on a regular basis, right? Even though that's not your natural state, like try to have that energy level. Another item is eye contact, right? So in North America, the tendency is if you're paying attention, if you're focused, you're looking at me in the eye, right? So that's much more important when you're in an in-person interview, but can be reasonably important on an icon in a virtual interview, right? So you can either be looking at the camera or you can be looking at the screen, but you're probably not looking over there or not over there or over there, right? So I've actually talked to someone recently. They were hiring for someone and they were like interviewing someone and they said, well, can I have a few minutes, please? And that person noticed that they were typing and looking away because they had ChatGPT on the other screen trying to give them an answer for it, right? People do
You're
that,
kidding.
right? So no, they had it, right? So I mean, it's a thing. People do it, but at the same time, if they know, then you probably won't do so well. Another thing that some people don't appreciate are filler words, right? So I do them as well. Those ums, ers, like, but, and oftentimes when you're nervous, you do a lot more. And sometimes to the point where it's like every other word and like you start with every single sentence and when you do that, it's super distracting, I can't pay attention to your answer because every other sentence, every sentence starts with an or whatever, and it just becomes annoying, right? And then you have things like pace. So some of you, when you're nervous, you talk really fast and you go a mile a minute, and I can't even understand what you're saying because you're speaking so fast. And it's like, what the heck did you just say? Some of you speak a little bit slower because you need to think about what you're saying. And that also is a bit annoying because I just want you to get on with it. So it's the balance between fast and slow. And sometimes it's posture, right? So some people don't appreciate that when they slouch, right? They don't look as confident. They don't sound as confident as well, right? And even with the present, so I talked about the hands. Those are some things that indicate more positivity, more confidence, right? And for the delivery, using frameworks like share or star, right? So those are things that can be helpful. Most folks are familiar with star, right? But share is the one that I use, and actually that's the one we used at Deloitte, right? So that's why I prefer it. They changed the T, so the situation is the same. The T is for task, but share they talk about a hindrance, which is the challenge, the problem, and really the impact that it had. The A and the R are the same, action and result. And then the E is one thing which I think it's upgraded, right? The E is evaluate. Evaluate what you just said in the context of the role. So basically that second part of the question, and why does it benefit the company in the role? That's what E does, right? Because sometimes if you have experience that's not exactly relevant, then I can't connect the dots. But if you specifically call out, this is why it's helpful to this role, the E can be such a game changer by connecting what you just said, right? And what you want to do is have a natural ending, right? Because in the today's day of virtual interviews, sometimes I don't know if you stop talking or the internet just cut out or something, right? But the easiest way for a natural end to the answer is to restate the question. Tell me about yourself, blah, 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 blah. And that's a little bit about myself. Tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult person, blah, 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 blah. And that's how I dealt with a difficult person, right? Not necessarily the best way to do it, but the easiest way to do it, right? You want to practice so that they're ready for to ask you the next question and they know you're done. And the other part is attire, right? So professionalism is important, right? And Kunal, I think you have a story that would be helpful to tell about attire, if you don't mind sharing that one.
Yeah, not at all, guys. Somewhere around 26 or 27, I actually got my first management job because I wore a suit to the interview. And I've shared this with others, but like again, I know the world has changed, and 20 plus years later, I'm old. But I would honestly just err on the side of caution and do this. So I beat out somewhere between 30 and 50 people, many of whom actually had more experience than me, for this management job. And a lot of the things that Luki has pointed to here resonated. So gentleman comes in, interviews 30 to 50 people over a 2 to 3 day period for a supervisor role at a bank. I'm one of the last people who he interviews. He turns to me at the end of it and says, I'm going to offer you the job. We had a great conversation. That's one thing I'm going to state that definitely works for me, is treating this as a human to human interaction. I know IT has changed some of this dynamic, but one of the ways I get around nervousness is really just telling myself, hey, look, you're talking to another person and this has to fit on both ends, right? It's got to be a fit for you as much as it is a fit for them. And it's got to be the right situation with the right work, the right environment, et cetera, et cetera. So talk to, I did dress the part, right? And his comment to me after was, we had a great conversation. There are people who are more experienced. I'm going to offer you the job. My honest answer was, why? Okay. And his response was, of all the people that I've interviewed over a 2.5 to 3 day period, you're the only one who had enough respect for me and the position, which is in management, to show up in a suit and to show the job the respect it deserves. Call it old school, but it worked.
Yeah. Yeah, and that just goes to show where sometimes the details can be the differentiator, right? So yes, in the days of like startups and hoodies and things like that, but oftentimes they won't say, well, I'm not going to take him because he was overdressed, right? They'll probably find a different reason to not select you if that's the case.
I'll tell you guys this, like, again, I do independent consulting work, and I go to a client's office, which is somebody that I've been working with for 3+ years. And, even their CEO is largely in jeans and a dress shirt, right? And the staff look at me now, they're like, man, like, you forget the consulting thing. You're one of us. Like, what are you doing? Right? Which is great from a cultural perspective that they look at me that way. But I still show up in a suit, right? And it's just, look, I still happen to work with their executives team, still owe them that respect, still come from a place where, symbolic gestures like that make sense. Unless somebody has Zuckerberg money, I wouldn't recommend doing the hoodie thing, right? And if you do have that kind of money while you're interviewing for a job, I mean, that's another conversation, right? But for most of us, specifically those of you who are going into professional environments, I would err on the side of caution here, guys, and just keep it old school, if we can call it that, and dress professionally, to show that you are in fact serious about this, and have the maturity behind you to show it that respect.
Yep, for sure. And sometimes you can even call that out. It's like, I wasn't sure about the dress code, but I wanted to make sure that I was professional and presentable. And yeah, I'll adapt to the culture if
Yep,
this isn't there.
that's great.
That sort of thing.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah. All right, so that's the delivery side, one half of it, and the other part is the content, right? So a couple of things is for those that get through interviews, usually you answer the question, right? But sometimes that's not enough, because really what you want to do is showcase the experience. You want to make it as specific to the company as possible, right? And really it's to help them believe that you can do the work, and really to make it relatable at a human and emotional level. So this is where people often miss, where Kunal mentioned the interview was a conversation, right? And they got to understand them, and they liked him a little bit more, right? And if you can build that rapport before or during the interview, right, and basically make it seem like that they can, or they're so impressed, they wanted to hire you on the spot, right? So a lot of that is practice through having conversations, being able to connect with people. And when you're able to do that, then that can really go a long way, right? The key takeaway, or the biggest mistake that I find, is people give a generic answer. Just like some people will take the same resume and give it to the same company, right? They'll have the same tell me about yourself answer for every single role. Well, if you're tailoring your resume, your tell me about yourself should be different. And each of your answers to your question should be slightly different as well, right? So, and that only happens when you basically do the work, right? So ahead of the interview, what you want to do is research the company. And one thing that people often miss is the questions for the interview at the end. So 9 out of 10 times, 99 out of 100 times, the interviewer at the end will ask, thank you for your answers. Do you have any questions for us? Like when I was interviewing, the worst answer to that is nope, no questions. Because like, what, do you even want the job? Do you want to be here? Right? You're not curious at all about anything, that you didn't invest the time to learn a little bit about the company and ask questions, right? You have no curiosity, right? Then you want to practice all the common questions, right? Because if you can't answer, tell me about yourself, what are your strengths, like where do you see yourself in 5 years or whatever, then like, I don't know. I can't really help you, because those are the basic expected ones, right? That's kind of like interview hygiene and the basic things that you should be able to answer, right? And again, you always have to relate that to the company, right? Focus on that answer related to the company, related to the role, right? So as you answer those questions, pick like the top 3 responsibilities, qualifications, or whatever, and put it in the context of what they just said, right? And for those of you who say, oh, don't worry, I'll practice when I get an interview, right? Well, there's an expression, dig your well before you're thirsty. And I know the student mentality is to cram the night before, right? But it's like committing to run a marathon and practicing the night before, the week before, right? Where oftentimes what you want to do is expose yourself to all these different questions, practice getting through like the different examples that you have and working through them to the point where it's so familiar you can on the fly pick and choose what to assemble, right? And I use the analogy of Lego. For those that know Lego, it's like that building system, right? Create your Lego blocks based on the experience you have, because even though the questions that they can ask you, there's an infinite number, right? But your experiences are not, right? You really only have maybe 5, 10 different experiences that you want to talk about, right? Because that last experience is your teamwork example, but it's also your problem solving example. It's also your leadership example. It's also your whatever. And those in different packages or in different forms can make a different scenario, right? So just like you can take the Lego blocks and make different things, right? You can package them up differently. And the more that you practice these different questions, the more that you understand that, oh, there are always themes. They're going to be asking about time management, about customer service, about this and that or whatever. But the way they ask it or the specific concept is slightly different, right? So you might not be able to practice for their exact answer, but you can get 80% close, 60% close, right? And the more that you can do it, then the faster that you can come up with the example and then adapt it to exactly what they said versus thinking about, I'm not sure, and then the rest of it goes off, right? So another easy thing to do if you aren't doing it already is use the job posting as interview questions, right? Go to the responsibilities, go to the qualifications. Tell me about a time when you demonstrated whatever the first bullet says. Tell me about a time when you demonstrated the second bullet, third bullet, fourth bullet. Because if that's what you're going to do, guess what sort of questions I'm going to ask you about, right? It's right there. They give it to you, right? And then what you want to do is practice it in the negative. Tell me about a time when you demonstrated and something went wrong, right? Because not everything goes according to plan, right? Then answer it based on one of your strengths. So let's say you're a people person, you're detail oriented, and you're analytical, right? So answer the first one based on being a people person, right? Based on being analytical, based on being detail oriented. Then answer it again based on your last experience, 2 experiences ago, your volunteer work or whatever, your coursework, whatever you can go to. And if you get to a question where like, I didn't actually do it there in this experience, well then, how would you answer the question anyways? Because if they expect you to do it, right, how could you do it? And again, part of it is exposing yourself to all these different permutations and that the surprise element, oh, I didn't think they would ask that question, is out there. And when you think of like some of the common interview questions, there was a thing like a decade ago where they were using like the brain teasers, right? Like how many basketballs fit in a 747, and they've since disproven that. But unfortunately, some interviewers still haven't got the memo. Some people are still using them. So don't be surprised if you get one of those ones, and just be mindful of doing that. A lot of those ones are, they want to understand your thinking style. So you just need to be able to come up with the answer, but talk out loud as you do it, because they want to hear the way that you're thinking, right? And again, practice all of the responsibilities and bullets and things like that, and start practicing now. Like, don't wait till you have an interview. Once you've applied, start practicing, and take an hour a day, right? 2 hours a day if you can, right? And practice. If you think about it, answering an interview question might take you 2-3 minutes, right? It might take you 2-3 minutes to review the one before, and then it might take you 2-3 minutes to get ChatGPT to give you a model answer, and then craft it so that it's something that you can say, right? So overall, like, it might take you 10 minutes to answer a question, and a job description might have 10-15 bullets, right? So in an hour or two, you should be able to practice for that one. But don't stop there, because if your answer was a 7 out of 10, well, you need to get to an 8, a 9, a 10 out of 10, right? So that's something to consider. And the most important question of all is the tell me about yourself, right? So this is one where there's all sorts of different ways, and my way is not the only way to do it, but you can definitely think about this. Pick whichever way works, but experiment with this one and see if it's helpful for you. So I put in the chat basically a worksheet. And I've restricted it, so give me 1 second while I update it. Okay, so this worksheet is basically a bit of a tell me about yourself, right? So the most basic tell me about yourself is I'm whatever your name, and I'm a something, and I'm known for, right? Super basic. If you're really new to the game, you can start with that. It's probably not going to move you to the next round. But a little bit more are all of these different things, right? And in this diagram, I like you to treat tell me about yourself as an upside down pyramid. And the width of the pyramid is based on the relevancy to the role, right? Because a lot of folks, a lot of students will start with their degree, right? So I'm a fourth year student, I'm an MBA grad, I'm a whatever. It's like, does that differentiate you from anybody? Right? No, like the 30, 100 other people in your graduating class, plus the 27 other graduating class, you're no different than anybody else, right? So, Kunal?
Prakar and Amoli, you're sick of me saying this to you both. How many times have you heard me say this to you or your classmates or to anybody else on Getting Ahead?
I
Do not
just
start the
realized I
summary
did the
of your
same thing.
resume or your professional sort of experience statement with I'm a Schulich MBA grad or whatever it is. I don't care.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just did that right now when I introduced myself to Luki. So
Yep. Nope. All good. We got to get out of this habit, guys. You guys got to sell yourselves as people and as professionals who know what you're doing. I'm gonna like this one drives me crazy. I got to tell you, man. And you know, it's not just me. The CEO of LinkedIn came out December 2022. Okay, I'm going back 15-ish months. Okay, and basically came out and said, look, their data, world's largest professional platform, openly tells them that people are not being hired based on degrees anymore. It's all experience and skill sets, right? So and you know, I've had others come in and do chats on this, including a gentleman who, Joe Stetter, who has worked with actually Indeed to build their algo, their resume screening algo. Okay, and Joe has told people openly, you have 150 words to nail those keywords, and nobody is looking for your degree in the name of the school. There's no algo looking for it. Right. So do not start off your introduction to yourself as I'm an MBA grad from, or I'm a X grad from. That's not who you are. It's a piece of paper that you have.
And the challenge is the coaching comes from your career center, and they have a vested interest in talking about that, right? Because they want you to advertise their program, but do what will land you a job, not what they necessarily tell you to do. Because my view is that the job search is an exercise in critical thinking, because someone will tell you one thing and then someone else will tell you the total opposite. And you have to decide for yourself which one is most relevant. And usually the way that you decide is, has the person who gave me the advice ever hired anybody? And if the answer is yes, then you can start taking that a little bit seriously. And then you want to ask, how many have they hired, right? Because maybe they hired just one versus, I mean, mine, we would hire about 100 every year, undergrads, and then however many co-ops. And then we would have the experience hires as well, which we hired at least 200 in our group as well. So those are my numbers. It's not huge compared to like a recruiter. But the other part is you have to be careful of recruiters, because technically recruiters do not hire people. Recruiters are the filters so that someone else can hire them, right? So just be mindful of that, right? I had the fortune of playing both roles, where I was the filter and I made the decision on who to hire, right? So for those are the people that you really want to listen to, because they've gone through the hundreds, thousands of resumes, so they know how to get through the filter. Plus, they've made the final decisions like, yep, we're going to make an offer to this person, right? So just be mindful of those. And you basically want to become a marketer for, well, Prakar, he got that. But for those of you who aren't, you need to turn yourself into the product, the service that's there. And if you can create like a hook for yourself, something interesting, maybe something that even showcases your personality, and ideally relating it to the job description, right? Something that they're asking for is what you want, which means, again, your tell me about yourself should be different between jobs. because each job will have a slightly different configuration of Lego box that they're looking for, right? Ideally, if you can tell me a story, maybe 1 star, 1 share framework that gives me a detailed example of it, and you can support it with the less relevant stuff, right? So if you want to tell them that you're an MBA, that'll be on the thinner part of the triangle, right? That might be helpful, but it's probably closer to the end. And then you summarize it and you close it, right? So here's, I guess, a worksheet. So if folks want to come in, I see a couple of folks that are there, the anonymous lemur and the penguin. But if you want to commandeer a section and basically take the participant, put your name in or highlight it, then what I want you to do is tell me about yourself, right? So there's all sorts of different frameworks like past, present, future, education, experience, fit. There's this one from Carrie Twigg that I found on LinkedIn. It was from a while ago. And some of the considerations is you want to make it personal to the company, right? Ideally, what that means is to say the name of the company at least once, right? And it's the difference between saying, hey, Luki, and saying, hey, you, right? Well, name the company that you're working for. Give them that little bit of credit. A specific example is great too, because sometimes people just list, I'm a detail-oriented, hardworking, blah, 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 right? But if there's no tangible substance under it, right, I don't really believe you as much, right? So that's the second part. Remember the fit, skills, and experience. Skills is if you've shown me how to do it, then I believe it, right? So there's an expression, show me, don't tell me. Showing me gives that detailed example of this is how I did it. This is how I was able to do it, not just I did it. And you just have to believe me, right? That's because that's what everybody else is saying, right? And really what you want to do is practice it so much, it doesn't even seem rehearsed, right? Because some people think that, well, I don't want it to seem like I'm regurgitating it. So don't, because when you practice it so much, you can on the fly change things up and make adjustments. So for those that are willing, you can get in there. Can everybody access it? Can you make changes to it? Yeah. So if you want to go through and make updates, then we can actually see you make some changes. And again, grab this and make a change. I had some other ones as well. But that was for a different example. So you can work on that. And one thing that I want to, just to, in the interest of time, is interviewing is all about practicing. It's all about practicing, right? Some people want to wing it, right? And they hope it, well, that's not how it works, right? It's all about practice and putting it there. So you can use AI, ChatGPT, right, to help you practice, not in the actual interview. I told you about the person who is doing it on the fly. Be careful of that, though. Like, apparently AI is quite scary, where they like can deep fake you and have it take your voice. And someone was showing me a demo where there's only one person in the interview and 5 AIs that were pretending to be someone else, right? So it's close, but it's not quite there. It's pretty scary stuff out there. But there are tools. One of them that I like using is one called Udily, right? So udily.ai, and there's a bunch of them out there. But what you can do with that is it'll record you, it'll transcribe it, and it'll give you some suggestions on it. So here's the platform. Right, so we'll have someone here, and basically it will transcribe it. It'll count your ums, right? And it'll take a look at, let's say, your eye contact, your pacing, too fast, too slow, and it'll give you some suggestions. Right? This is what you said. Is that what you want? Or this is a different way that you can say it as well, right? So AI, I mean, it's good, but it's not great. So always take it with a grain of salt and say, okay, maybe I can take this part, but not that part. Remember, exercise in critical thinking. But the great thing is it often points out things that you weren't paying attention to. It's like, oh, I didn't know I said that much, right? I thought it was pretty good, but I'm not as good as I thought. Repetitions are another one where you say the same thing over and over again. That's another bit of a distraction. And just thinking about sentence starters, I'm guilty of that as well. You'll probably notice that a lot of my sentences start with so, right? I'm trying to get that down, but it's an annoyance that I get. I'm like, geez, I gotta change that. And it's helpful. The interesting thing is you can give it a bank of questions, and what it will also do is ask you a question about your answer. Right. So it's almost like emulating a interviewer where it says, well, tell me about the business opportunities they had in Toronto 2 years back. Tell me more about this and this and this, right? So it actually gets you thinking more on the fly instead of in there. And whatever tool you use, it doesn't really matter as long as you practice, because it's all about practice, right? So I talked about like the marathon analogy, and it's kind of like that. You can't start by running whatever 43, 46 kilometers, whatever a marathon is. You'll probably have to start with 1 kilometer and then 2, 3, 4, 5. And some of you are natural athletes and you might do 10 kilometers, but you want to train to get to that level and not just hope, right? So there's a quote that I like: you don't rise to the level of your expectations, you fall to the level of your training, right? So would you rather hope that this answer is a 9 out of 10? Or train to make sure that this answer is a 9 out of 10, right? So that's something that I encourage you to think about, right? So it's all about the practice doing that. And then one thing that I've been recommending to folks is to pitch yourself in an interview, right? And what that means is just kind of tell me about yourself. And essentially what you want to do is to turn it into a quick presentation, right? So 1 sec. So I have a little template and I can share it with the folks online as well. But this is basically a template that I use, and you don't have to include these ones, but what role and company, and obviously you remove that there. And this is an example where I was pitching myself for a soft skills training program. And then when they say, tell me about yourself, then I say, oh, actually, do you mind if I present a few slides? And they'll be like, huh? What? And then you basically go in, and instead of talking about yourself, you can say, so my name is Luki, and I'm a career coach focused on soft skills and job search development. I started my career as a Big Four management consultant, and I used to be heavily involved in the campus recruiting team, which showcases my experience in being able to understand the resume, the interview, and the networking process. And I'm actually a U of T grad, and I know a lot of the students will be in computer science and technical disciplines as well. I think I'm a great fit for the instructor because I've been there and I've done that. So I was a technical person who had to develop my own soft skills, and having been a former recruiter and experienced educator where I've done a lot of these workshops before, I can definitely hit the ground running with a lot of material and even starter content to make sure that our program is successful. And you should hire me because of my background and experience are aligned with your student needs. I'm familiar with the department as well, and I have a genuine passion for helping out students, right? And imagine that coming in. And I've had folks that when they do it, the recruiters have said, like, I've been recruiting for like 15 years and I didn't care what you said. I want to hire you. Right? So that's the power of this. And the other part is nobody, who else is going to do this, right? There's an expression, the extra mile is never crowded, right? And if you think about it, it's just 3 slides with 3 icons each and a little bit of text. It's really a bit of a gimmick, but that little thing is something that will help you stand out, right? So if you do those little things and focus on your content, focus on your delivery, that's what you want. So for the next little while, I want to ask, does anybody want to practice, right? So this is interview theater. So I put a summary of all the things that we talked about, but does anybody here want to be on the hot seat? And for those that are here, you're here, you might as well, right? And get some feedback and stuff. So
I don't mind doing this. I mean,
Molly, thank you so much.
I'm not prepared, but I will take a shot at it.
Sounds good. So what company or role would you want to mock interview for?
So I am looking for consulting roles, as much as Kunal has tried to sway me away from it. But Let's do that.
Okay, any particular firm that you're more interested in?
So, I mean, Deloitte and EY have been on the list for a while, as
Okay.
much as Deloitte does not want me. And EY was where I worked for 5 years, so I think that's still there. Yeah.
Okay. So, do you have a particular type of consulting that you?
So I'm looking for business strategy consulting. It could be, I'm not fixed on industry. I would like for it to be in finance, but it's more industry agnostic.
Okay.
So growth consulting, basically.
Growth consulting. Okay. So, all right. So I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute because I want to invite you to lead to the call.
Oh, this is
Okay.
intense.
All right. So thank you so much, Molly, for coming in for the interview at Deloitte in the business strategy group. Why don't you start off by telling us a bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Amoli. I'm an aspiring management consultant. With my professional background and educational background, I believe that I'll be a good fit. I worked as a consultant for 5 years with EY, doing transfer pricing consulting, and then did my MBA, believing that it would fill the gaps that I had in my knowledge base, wanting to get into more of business consulting from transfer pricing, tax consulting. Oh, yeah, I remembered.
I'll ask you to lead to leave. And okay, let's give Amali a round of applause, everybody. Well done. So I'm going to ask you, Amali. So if you were to rate yourself out of 10, how would you rate on that answer?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, well, after I ended, I realized that I did not end it properly. So I left it, and I could understand if I was on a Zoom call, it would seem like I just stopped talk or something went wrong. So
Yeah.
I realized that very soon. I tried to change how I would generally introduce myself. So I would generally say that I'm an MBA graduate very early on, but I tried to kind of bring it towards the end, saying that why I did it, and what led me for to do that. And yeah, so I think I'd probably rate myself a 6, 5 or 6, maybe.
Okay. So what did you do well? What could you have done better?
So I think what I did well was that I started it off in a better way, saying that this is what I want to do. And then I showcased that I do have the experience for it and I do have the educational qualifications for it. And I also did lead, and I also did kind of bridge the gap between why did I do this education qualification, because I believe that it would help me reach where I want to do, or where I want to reach. What I should have done better was obviously end it in a more seamless manner and not just leave it like that.
Okay. Great. And I'd love if folks in the gallery are willing to provide some feedback. So when I ask for feedback, you have to say something nice before you say something constructive, right? So looks like Kunal wants to go.
I'm gonna go. So Molly's a friend, and she knows this is all coming from a good place. One, you always have a smile on your face. You speak very well. I think that resonates, right? You always come across as warm and friendly, and as human, right? And to me, those are big things. Okay, being human versus being some machine-like professional bot is not, it's not what I hire for, right? I hire humans to do human work. Areas of opportunity. I'm going to give you an example of potentially how I would answer the question. Okay, just putting myself in your shoes. And Luki, I'm curious to see what you have to say about this.
Sure.
Okay, I'm not going to use your name, I'll use mine. I'm Kunal, an experienced professional with a career in management consulting. I have a passion for solving problems related to strategy, technology, data, and process. And this has led me to a career where both my education and my experience have provided or prepared me to work with clients and to work with leadership to add tremendous value or create tremendous value for them. That's one side of what I do. The other side is heavily related to people. My entire career, whether it's leading teams, working with executives, working and collaborating internally in the firm, is always about people. And I love partnering with people. Outside of all of this and the day-to-day professional, Kunal, things that matter in my life, family, my daughter, and then mentorship and giving back to others. Right. And maybe we don't have to go back. I'd be very curious to see Luki or to hear Luki's feedback on this. But if I trade off what you did, which is again very much about the education, and I know you deferred it, and this, what I want to hear in that interview, everybody has that education. What I want to hear is what drives you, what makes you unique, what brings you here that's going to keep you here, keep you interested, keep you solving problems, keep you adding value.
Yeah, I thought it was a better answer than Molly. There's
Now, mind you, Amoli, I'm 20 some odd years older than you. Okay,
yeah, it's got
and
a little
have
bit more
done
practice.
this a long, long time.
Yeah.
But my feedback would be get out of the habit of, yes, Prakar, I'm old, you can laugh. All right, you can come on screen and laugh if you want. My feedback would really be position it about it being something that you're passionate about doing, right? And that you've done and you're back to it with a broader skill set because of your passion for it, right? If I'm sitting in that room and saying, man, I've got 50 of these people sitting in front of me, the things that are going to differentiate you for me, and again, I appreciate everybody is unique, is what drives you to do this on a day-to-day basis versus a paycheck. And then within that, what makes you unique as a person, right? And the things that I personally look for, yes, definitely human. Okay. I want somebody who is human, who fits a team, who acts like a human, not like a bot. If I wanted to hire Chat GPT, I'd go hire Chat GPT, right? Or if I wanted to go hire a bot, I'd find a programmer to build me a bot, right? But you have, and others have said this to me about you, you connect with people, right? And they always appreciate the smile on your face, the energy you bring to one-on-one interactions. So I think for me, and just the feedback I would have for you is, and this gets lost, right? Because it really goes back to something Luki said. We all try really hard to fit ourselves into a box and over-engineer it. And I know we come out of these schools with these big names and these big, and with these mandates that it's like you got to fit this mold, you got to be, speak like this, talk like this, look like this, sound like this, you got to use these words. Okay, and maybe I'm the anomaly to this, but I'm looking for what drives you as a professional to continue to do this work, to continue to add value, and what makes you unique as a person, right? Beyond the words, beyond the speak, beyond the jargon, right? And for me at least, that's what I'd love to see. I'll hire that any day over the suit. Right. Mind you, I got the job, as I expressed earlier, wearing the suit. But, 17, 18 years later, and having done what you want to do for a long, long time now, I will tell you it's okay to be yourself, right? And it's okay to express what drives you, what you're good at adding value in, and then talking about yourself as a human. The other side of that story that I told you about, guys, that got me that first management job. I talked to this gentleman again. I was 26, and he had interviewed 30 or 40 others, and went into an interview. And these people had more experience than me. I'll be 46 this year. I can 20 years later recall the interview. Okay. Good to meet you. Likewise. Tell me about yourself. This question. talked to him about certain personal experiences in life and my interest in the markets. And yeah, I was working at TD and trade execution and stuff like this. And talked to him why I was passionate about it. We went through kind of the mechanics of an interview. Then we started talking about life, right? And he was telling me at that point he had just bought a new pickup truck. And honestly, we were sitting there talking about what color the truck was, the size of the engine in the truck, stuff like this, and we just connected on a human level, right? So, and that for me, I think is what unfortunately gets coached out of us, right? But if I go back to a lot of what Luki has presented here today, look at this list: smile, eye contact. These are natural human interactions that other humans still want to see. Right now, Luki, you can tell me I'm wrong on all this, man. But like personally, as somebody, this is what I would hire for.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what is the differentiator in this market, right? There are lots of people with way more experience, a lot more technical expertise than you, if not equivalent, right? And if you're fighting on that, there's someone who's smarter than you, right? Who's got more experience or whatever. But if you can make me like you more, that is going to be the key differentiator. So the art of having a conversation and connecting with you on the color of your pickup truck or the size of the engine or whatever, right? That's lost, especially with COVID, right? There's a whole generation of grads who they don't even know how to do that, right? So you're outweighted against that. Just the fact that you can smile and connect with people. But at the end of the day, there needs to be a little bit of substance, because how many other folks are going to have the MBA, probably have some experience and things like that. So a lot of great things. What you probably want to do, again, make it that warm and friendly, as Kunal had mentioned. That are probably for different parts of the interview where you want to ask questions about them and their experiences and things like that, right? Start with rapport and getting to know them at the beginning, right? But for your answer, I would probably put like some sort of tangible example, right? So you have 5 years at EY. Can you give me the best example of showing why you can do business strategy? Because I was 5 years at EY and I was in the mailroom, right? So just because you have a brand on your name doesn't mean you did anything there, right? The other part is, well, EY is different than Deloitte, right? Did you take any time to understand the cultural differences or the work differences or whatever? And I while I was here, I attended an event at Deloitte, and my coffee chat with so and so really shed light on the differences between the two, and this is why I'm interested in Deloitte versus EY. So again, humanizing the experience, right? So the detailed example of some sort, humanizing experience, and you got it. I mean, you just gotta just the hygiene of like ending it so that I know that you're actually finished there. Yeah. So those are the kind of the basics that I have, and then refine it and do it again and do it again and do it again until it's an 8, 9, 10, and then try it in a different way. Try it expressing it from and learning a little bit more. Like, did you read something in the news about some strategy consulting that Deloitte recently did, or they released a white paper, or this any sort of research? One phrase that I like to use here is in preparation for this interview, and what did you do? Right? Did you just come here and wing it, or did you actually take the time where you research, you talk to people, you did this, that, and basically make me feel like you want the job, that you want to be here, right?
Now, this is so important, right? Ask, like this art of the conversation thing, guys, is something that I think is just so lost, specifically as you go through these places, right? Like the Big Four, the consulting whole, the case interview thing. It's really hard to do this, right? But you have to find a way to bring this back to, and to this takes the pressure off you, right? Into, yes, you did the case, you justified your knowledge and your thinking and your process in terms of thinking, your thought process and your ability to analyze, solve problems, all those things, but then turn it into a conversation. Right. And this is the other thing I would say to you guys that's worked for me. Every MBA student I've told this story to honestly hates me. But I'm going to tell you how I got my job at Deloitte. And it's not to rub it in anybody's face. Okay. Coming out of an MBA program, '06, through a contact who was working there, a good friend of mine, I get an interview with a partner. I knew nothing. Okay. And I know people from Deloitte are going to see this, and some of them will be like, yeah, we taught them how to use this stuff. And others will just shake their head. I didn't know how to use PowerPoint. Okay, I'm literally telling you, I could not go into, Luki, you're shaking your head, you're smiling. I got a job in 15 minutes with an interview with a partner and a manager. How did I do it? Okay, one, I had an intro that got me into this interview. Okay, so luck was working in my favor. Two, I answered the tell us about yourself with coming out of a 6 years in financial services, still have a passion for it and process improvement and this kind of stuff. And yeah, I happen to be managing this team doing X at Bank Y. I've also learned that I'm actually really passionate about talent development and managing resources during that time. I stopped and I said to the partner, look, we all know that I got here through a referral. I've heard some incredible things about you. Can you tell me about some of the work that you and the team have done? Okay, 15-minute interview. And this is, one of the tricks I always use. This gentleman spent 10 minutes talking about himself. Turned to me at the end of it, turned to the senior manager, was like, you have any questions for him? He's like, he's presentable. He has a 6-year background in FS doing some interesting stuff, and it's leverage that, that's experience that ties to 80% of our revenue. Do you have questions for us? I'm like, not really. Could have done that better. Definitely. Okay. But I closed off with saying, look, love the work that you do based on what the partner described. Definitely think I have a background to step in and help out and help create value. I do have a passion for people management, and I think I can bring that to the firm as my career here grows. And we kind of ended it that way, literally 15 minutes. Okay, now there's a lot of things in that interview that I would have done better, but the things that I give myself credit for that I think, again, are lost, that tie into a lot of what Luki has talked about, is connect with people as people. Make your statement up front. I'll tell you now, what I want to see in that statement as somebody who's done this for too long now, okay, is what have you done? How does it fit into what we're doing? What are you passionate about that's going to keep you doing it at the top of your game? How are you going to contribute in other ways? Okay, so when I hear people are passionate about talent development, passionate about building the right culture, building, et cetera, those are things for me at this point in my career that stand out. And then I want to hear about examples of them. And then I want us to get to know you as a person. Right. And I really do fault a lot of business schools. I'm not going to name names here. I think they're all in this box for me. I went through the same. Okay, when they train people and talent on interviews, they take away the human side of it. And it's really unfortunate because the human side of this is honestly, once you get past the red light and the whatever these AI technologies are now, when you get through all this, you got to connect with somebody on a human to human level right now, because I don't work with Elon Musk, and I don't know anybody who wants to work with just a bunch of bots. So at some point, you got to connect with them on a human level, right? And I think this is unfortunately something that as we go through all these education programs and these case competitions and these things, that it's we're told not to do it, but that's what differentiates you at the end of the day. For me, at least.
Yeah.
Right. So Amoli, going back to you, I think you have tremendous strengths. Just my honest feedback to you as a friend is like, don't be afraid to share what drives you and what differentiates you as a person.
Yeah, I think now that the way you put it out there, I think some of my best interviews were when I was more open to the conversation as opposed to being very rigid and in my head about it. Um and um and yeah, I think that definitely, like, now that it's put out there in this sense, I think I can kind of reflect on it a little bit better. A question that I had here was that, um, and this is something I definitely learned at business school, was like your tell me something about yourself question should not be very long. Your answer should not be very long. Because that's where they just want to, like, it's just like the starter, and then they're going to ask you a lot. You don't want to use up all your stories or whatever. Like, you don't want to say a lot about yourself there, and then it's going to unravel as the interview goes. So that was one question that I definitely did have.
What does very long mean?
What does very long mean, first of all? Because it's like, so for us it was more like, it should be like your elevator pitch.
My typical response is every answer should be roughly 1 to 2 minutes long.
Oh, okay, that's way different then.
Yeah, because it goes back to the third point is like, and why should I hire you, right? So in 30 seconds, do you have enough time to tell me why I should hire you?
No.
In 2 minutes, you should be able to do that.
Yeah.
Minute and a half, right? So
Yeah.
this is one where, again, you want to ask the person who's providing the guidance, how many people have they hired?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And if they are like the Deloitte recruiter of blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
okay, listen. And if they're not,
Yeah.
then you have to look at different guidance. Right.
Sure.
And the other part is there's never a one size fits all, because I do know some partners that want keep it short, and I'll get you to, this is more of a courtesy formality question, and I actually have other questions I really want to ask you.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, at least the folks that I know, they like that answer because it guides the conversation on what I should talk to you about, because most of them do not have a script. Right? They will say, based on what you say, I'm going to ask you a question about what you just said. And then I'm going to ask you a question about what you just said about what you just said. And then keep on going and drilling down until there's a point where you can't answer or I'm satisfied.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So, and if there's nothing to pull on, right, then I'm kind of stuck. Right.
Got it.
But again, you'll get differing opinions and you'll have to decide what works well for you. Because if you're doing it just because, versus I'm giving you the I call it the first principles. As a an interviewer, if someone just came in and said it for 30 seconds, I'd be like, okay. And then I'm done, right? Versus you tell me about your interests, your passions, your research, and what you did about that. I actually don't care if you go on for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, as long as there's a good story, there's substance to that or whatever, and you make it engaging enough. But usually I get bored after about 2 minutes, so try to keep it a little bit shorter. So yeah, that's something that I would suggest.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, because if, like, so I think the one place that I definitely did go wrong right now, when you asked me that question when we started the interview, was also because in my head I was trying to keep it short. And I think that's something that I have done quite a bit. I think the only interviews where I've been very open is where I've gotten that, either it was an in-person interview, or it was that the person on the other side of the screen seemed to be very warm, just the way that they were, just the way it started with, hi, how are you doing? Just like that we had like those 15 seconds or maybe even a minute of just small talk, where he or she just eased me in, and then we went in, and that was where it was probably the good ones, where I actually did speak about, why I got into consulting, what happened, how did that whole transition happen, why did I do an MBA, and it actually made sense. And it was a story, as opposed to just like a sentence. So I think that does clarify my question. Thank you so much.
Prakar, looks like you have your hand up too.
Yes, thank you, Luki. So, speaking of what Amoli you said, I kind of do not agree, to be honest. Like, I don't really know if the tell me about yourself or elevator pitch should be too long or not, but it sure as hell cannot be too short, believe me about it. Like, I've had very bad experiences with it where I just speak for maybe 30-35 seconds and then I'd stop, and I can clearly tell that the interviewer was expecting me to tell him or her a lot more, so anything less than 90 to 120 seconds simply doesn't sell. And I'm not sure where exactly. I think at some point of time I came across a piece of research which said that you should perhaps tell the best, like from all the way from start to end. about your experience, maybe not in detail, but just give an overview perhaps as a part of the elevator pitch. So you'll be kind of in a control of the conversation because they'll have an idea. But when you keep it too brief, I don't know, it kind of maybe throws off the vibe that you're just not prepared enough or you do not have enough to say. Because if you are maybe responding to something as crucial as tell me about yourself for just 30-35 seconds, yeah. So that's when I realized that that's probably where I'm messing up. So yeah.
Kunal
I
wants to jump
honestly,
in.
I ask you guys this, right? A couple of things. One, can you really adequately describe yourself in 30 to 35 seconds in a way that differentiates you from the other 20 people that this organization might be looking at? Two, I'm going to ask this honestly. Would you want to work at a place that literally only wants you to fit into a 20 to 30-second box as an individual? I mean, it's an honest question. Okay. Because for me, 20 to 30 seconds is, look, I can do it. Okay. And yes, I talk too much. I can find a way to cut things down to 20 to 30 seconds. Amoli knows this. She's laughing because it's true. But I don't want to be in that place where I'm treated as a bot or a machine. Right. And this again, it's culturally, this is the type of stuff you guys need to be assessing as you're in these situations as well.
Awesome. So lots to digest there. I have one more kind of content slide to have, and this is
Yep.
where folks often want to increase their confidence a bit because they get into the interviews and they're not really that. So if you're familiar with TED Talks, then Amy Cuddy has a good one on the link between the mind and the body. And basically what you want to do is a power pose. And what that is kind of like this diagram, if you can see faintly, right? It's like Wonder Woman, Superman, here to save the day, right? Just stand there for 1 or 2 minutes. And there it has a psychological effect where it actually makes the person more confident. Now, don't do it like in the middle of the lobby. Maybe have a quiet corner on the side before you go into the building, right? A couple of other things is you can sensitize yourself to be more confident. Like students, go and sit in the front row, right? Instead of in the back and hiding yourself, right? Another interesting thing, there's research behind like walking 25% faster, right? So when you walk faster, there's more purpose in it. And when someone who's purposeful and trying to get somewhere purposefully tends to be more confident. And it's basically a bit of the fake it till you make it type of thing, right? Going with rejection therapy, because most people are not confident because they're afraid of no, of being told they're not good enough or whatever, right? So rejection therapy is going out there with the sole purpose of being told no, right? So there are ones where you can like ask people for the rest of their hot dog or burger or whatever, right? So maybe not that disgusting, but a simple way is what I call like asking for foolishness, which is basically like ask them, like let's say you're walking down Yonge Street downtown and you say, excuse me, can you tell me where Yonge Street is? And then they'll laugh and smile. Oh, you're on it. It's like, oh, thank you. Or tell me where this building is, which is right in front of you, that sort of thing, just for the sole purpose of feeling a little bit dumb or guilty, right? And then with desensitization, then the rejection is no longer important. Obviously, we talked about preparing and practicing and choosing your words, because often the words that you tell yourself are a window into your soul and your confidence. So instead of saying things like the negative, where like, oh, I hope I don't bomb this interview, right? You could have easily said, I hope I do my best in this interview, right? Just the choice of words can have a profound effect on it. So just don't say the negative and say the positive it. And things with like gratitude and affirmations can do wonders for increase your confidence. So as woo-woo as this might sound, there's growing research to say how valuable all of this stuff is, and we're just trying to starting to untap what the power of the human mind is, and these things they work, right? So
Honestly, guys, and like number 4 for me is huge, right? Because again, all of us hate rejection. It's a natural human instinct, right? And after you've been through these things so many times and it hasn't worked out, you start to doubt yourself, right? And this is something that I've heard a lot from a lot of very capable talent. Okay, I'm not, whatever it is, the right person. I'm not going to, like, you read any sort of research on highly successful people, they've learned how to deal with rejection time and time and time again, right? Or failure time and time again, and reframe it and learn from it. Right. And I'll tell you, like, look, for all the stories that I've told you about getting jobs, there's hundreds of them that I didn't get. Okay, I'm sharing with you guys two where it actually worked out for me out of, honestly, probably about 100 interviews over my career. I'm like, that's a 2% success rate. It's miserable. Okay, but you know, you just got to keep going, and you got to find through this process what works for you. And I think what Luki has shared here today, and that just through the conversation, and Emily, I give you a lot of credit as always, my friend, for actually volunteering yourself for this, because again, you're putting yourself in the line of rejection, right? Of feedback that this wasn't good enough. It was great, and I would just make some tweaks, right? And the one thing I want all of you guys to think about is, I learned this through going through this time and time and time again, right? How do you balance this equation of power in this situation between yourself and the interviewer? And you do it by, one, for me at least, being a human, talking to them about what interests me, what my passions are, what, you know, and how that fits into what they're looking for. Asking them, is this something that you value? Right. I know at this point in my career, and you know, you can go see the LinkedIn posts and stuff I've posted recently, I skew heavily towards the people side of leadership, careers, et cetera, right? So I'm looking for those situations and those interactions where, yeah, I'm not looking to write a Oscar speech and deliver one in the about me question, but are you giving me the time to be a human and to express 45 years of life and 25 years of work experience in 60 to 90 seconds? And are you willing to engage in a conversation that tells me that this is an environment that still works on a human level versus you wanting a bot in a human body? Right? So just keep going and keep learning from it and finding comfort in it. But number 4 is really critical. We're just not built for it. All of us. It's not just you. It's crap, but that's what leads to success. You have to go through that failure.
And I'd love if folks are willing to share a little bit about what was their most memorable takeaway from the session. And there might be multiple. So, Prakar, you want to share?
Yes, thanks, Luki. So, couple of things basically, to be honest, like one of the things that stood out for me the most, more than the others, I'll come to that later. Firstly, couple of things I knew, like I knew that you need to carry a proper attire, and that you should perhaps ask them questions. And these are the things that I got to learn only after I came to Canada, did a lot of research, attended webinars, read articles, interacted with Kunal. But then few things which I learned were, do not use filler words, pause instead, look them in the eye, be confident. But what stood out the most for me, like this is something which I did not learn from any other webinar, was that to have a job and to ace in an interview, you should ideally be really interested in the role you're applying for. Right, because as immigrants, I guess, I think it has come to a situation where a lot of us, I don't know if this applies only to immigrants or to, I'm pretty sure to a lot of people who are struggling in the job market, they pretty much just want a job. So where we need to tell the interviewer that we want the job, we are just telling him or her that we want a job. Right. So I think it's about regaining that confidence, because the situation of the market has kind of left all of us a bit scared. So due to the scarcity of options, perhaps, I think basically the fear of rejection, what was spoken about. So I think you need to cultivate that interest in that role, and that will show in your interview. I think it kind of stood out for me.
Great. Thanks so much. Amali, how about you? You were the most participatory. So
yeah, for me, this was definitely a lot of feedback. I mean, the fact that I could even like, I mean, just me doing that interview with you and, giving that one answer, I realized so many things that I need to change and work on. So that was definitely a eye opener. And I think I agree with what Prakhar just said. The fact that I mean, I've been on the job search journey for a while now. The rejection therapy is something that I think I've spoken to Kunal about like so many times. That in the last time we spoke was when I told him that I don't think I'm good enough anymore. Having worked for so long, having then doing an MBA and all of that, I still sometimes feel that I'm not good enough. But I like the approach to it, the way that you mentioned, going through that rejection therapy. That's a really good approach. I'm definitely going to take that away. And also agreeing with Prakhar, coming back to that, was that the market's really bad. So going the extra mile, when you said things like, while preparing for this interview, this is what I came across, or mentioning those coffee chats that you've actually had with people, and kind of sprinkling it out there in your interview shows that you're really, really interested in the job. So yeah, that was for me. Thank you.
And
Thank you so much.
Ramalikun, are you online still? If you can share, you're on mute. You have to
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm here. I had to attend to one or two things. That's why I put up my video. So okay. So for me, what stood out for me, before now, I know, yes, I have to practice, and so it has been more of the common questions like tell me about yourself, tell me about your strengths, and then things like that. But from this session, I got to take it out that whatever job position I'm applying for, I should take time to go through the requirements and try and create scenarios, think of likely questions that could be asked of me from that job description. Take them one by one. Yeah, it can be an Herculean task. It can take a lot of time, but it's something I should do. So that's a key takeaway for me from this session. And one other one came to my mind, but anyways, but I know I'll remember later. I have two takeaways from this. So the first one was the one and the other one I know I'll remember later. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Ramalikun. So thanks so much. Just to
Guys, I'll jump in. Like even I'm learning from this, right? It doesn't matter how many times you've done this. There's still things to learn, and there's still things to practice. It doesn't stop, right? But Luki, back to you. So next week, resumes, but
yeah, next week we're closing off the series with resumes and 6:30 again, and we'll do the same sort of thing. And if you want to know why your resume is not getting selected, this will probably enlighten it. Again, it's not the advice that you get out there. It's the what actually works. It's the first principles. It's this is what we're looking for versus, oh, it should be 2 pages or 1 page because of this. It should be this and that, right? Because again, it's all the advice out there is wrong and all the advice out there is right, except that you have to choose your particular context and understand why it's right or wrong in your specific context, right? And how to apply these things. So hopefully we'll see you next week. And then we have, I guess if you're not already, I think everybody's here already and getting ahead. And for me, I run this as a career confidence gym where we have practice for resumes, interviews, networking, all on a regular basis. And yeah, so if you're interested, then let me know and we can chat about having you join the Career Confidence Gym. So Kunal, any parting words?
no, I think it's been a great session. Ramalikun, I know you've been to all three, so appreciate all of your attendance and interaction in this. Amoli and Prakar as always. Car, you kind of have to come to these given you're part of the team, but Amoli, yeah, just come and take advantage, guys. Luki and I do this because we're passionate about helping each other or others get to a place where they want to get, and for both of us, in some way, shape, or form, we've been lucky enough to get to some of those places. And have found, as great as they were, there's more satisfaction in turning around and helping others get there as well. So just take advantage of it.
And what I'd love to hear is for the next interview, you say, yep, I mean, I've had so many before, and now I know why I'm able to pass this one or get to the next stage or whatever. So yeah. And now hopefully you can look back on the other ones like, oh, okay, now I know why those ones. Because before you had no idea why you weren't moving ahead. At least now you should have that perspective. But thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, hopefully we'll see you all next week.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Prakar, stick around.